space fantasy, space opera, sci-fi, space magic. What is it? When you think of the largest sci-fi IPs and brands out there, most people think of Star Wars or Star Trek. Battlestar Galactica, Battlestar Galactica, if you're old or unique like that. The rerun for Battlestar was limited in terms of the lore that it provided compared to the original run of the show. Anyway, sidetrack aside, a lot of people will usually think Star Wars. But is Star Wars truly a sci-fi brand? I think yes and no. Sci-fi encompasses so many genres underneath it, it exists like an umbrella genre, similar to how music does the same. It's so much easier to call all EDM dubstep or vice versa if you're not that into the specific genres themselves or you just don't care about semantics. So what does this have to do with sci-fi? There's so many discussions about what sci-fi truly is that people argue this and question it all the time. In a Reddit post by 20left, they asked, what genre is Star Wars? And one of the replies really sits similarly with my personal distinction of what Star Wars could fall under. It's a space fantasy rather than sci-fi because the workings of the world of Star Wars aren't trying to explain, what things work by or how it works because of science. The explanations aren't using science heavily in their stories. Rather, the stories of Star Wars very easily follow the space opera genre, in that they're long stories that span generations about great adventures with self-discovery. We see this with the explanation or the existence of the light and the dark side and how they conflict through most of our main protagonists throughout these stories. So why isn't something like Halo a space opera then? So this is where the big distinction kind of shows. The lore of Halo starts with how humanity starts normally, what we're used to, and continues as humans enter a grand war with other species. Personally, I'd feel more comfortable calling Halo a sci-fi brand because the technology is grounded in science that we already understand, continue to learn, or theorize about. We understand that there is science behind the technology that the aliens use. It's just not our preferred science or our technology either. But we do see humans using alien technology to their advantage, such as alien weapons. There's not any magic to be found in Halo. And this is another example. Everything is found to be explained through science, and there's a heavy grounding to realism, as we see artifacts being brought back by humans to be studied in labs by technicians and whatnot. However, Star Wars focuses on how the lives of people are impacted by these expansive events and the effects that one person can bring about. And I know Halo has the Master Chief, and we do see the perspectives of others, like in Halo 3 ODST, but with the limited size of these experiences that we get to see, just because Star Wars has so much lore, I think that the big difference is that Halo tries to talk about, Spartans are enhanced humans, not using magic and that sort of thing. And in comparison, we don't really see how the Force is explained, except that it's a gift. Now, people could argue that there's the midichlorian explanation, but many people widely disregard that, and for good reason. By having midichlorians exist in the Star Wars universe, it takes away from the overall fantasy by trying to scientifically explain the reasoning behind the Force and how different people have the Force. You have a high midichlorian count in your DNA or in your body, but that kind of also ruins the idea of the Force. Then wouldn't it be possible, just put midichlorians in somebody else? And that's why a lot of people disregard it. And if I'm not wrong, I believe that midichlorians in their explanation have been taken out of canon. And to continue off of this with space fantasy, there's another great example, and that's with the Destiny franchise, which was funnily created by Bungie, who's also responsible for some of the Halo titles. Although the lore of Destiny is explained by explanations we can understand in science, like Halo does, there are examples of many different things which remain as mysteries with little to no explanation. And actually, we see characters who try to understand these mysteries and create research, but even those characters remain so mysterious. Some of those being like Ikora Rey. She's the warlock leader in Destiny. I forget the name. but she basically, she's a representative of all warlocks in Destiny, and she's constantly doing research. That's what she's known for. But there are so many mysteries that she's still trying to understand, and sometimes a lot of these mysteries go unconcluded. In Destiny, we have this thing called the Light, and it's the source of a Guardian's powers. However, the Guardian's powers are observed by how they interact with Guardians, but we don't understand or really get explained by how the Light does this. Simply put, Titans are the best Guardians because their strength is amplified by the Light. And, okay, that's a personal opinion, but an example of this is that, yes, Titan Guardians are stronger because of the Light, and the Light interacts with their armor, with their matter weaves and whatnot, and they become much stronger, and they're able to lift much heavier weights than the average human or exo would be able to. But we know that because the Light amplifies their strength, but we don't really know biologically or on a physical effect of how that's being interacted to a scientific level with the Guardians. And that's just one example. For example, to defeat a Guardian, there's a few ways to do it throughout the lore. And there are some examples like the Darkness or Paracausal Power. And this type of topic in Destiny lore kind of gets a little bit weak here and hazy. But to summarize, there's basically much stronger entities than our main characters, which are almost revered as gods in their own way. And their existence is basically enough for the characters within the story of Destiny to understand, yes, there is this stronger power, not like in a religion, but we have talks about worm gods. We don't understand the workings of the traveler fully. Is the Darkness something we have to embrace, or is it something we understand? These are questions that still have to be answered. And even Strand was trying to be viewed as oh, this is the Darkness. And throughout the campaign, sure, we try to embrace Strand as a new ability class, or ability subclass, but we don't really understand how Strand interacts with each of these Guardians individually, right? We understand that it is power that is available, like magic. And speaking of magic, I think one of the best ways that Destiny has been described is that our characters are space wizards, space knights, and space hunters. And space wizards are your warlocks, space knights are your titans, and your space hunters, they're just hunters, but they bring a fantastical element to the generations ahead in the world of Destiny. So where am I confused with trying to understand the space fantasy genre? There's so many titles within the sci-fi umbrella genre that incorporate these sorts of magic and fantasy elements into sci-fi that I haven't covered all of them, but one of the examples that I've been able to understand a little bit, but I still learn more about, is cosmic horror and sci-fi being intertwined together. Usually you see them hand in hand, but sometimes you see cosmic horrors in non-sci-fi titles. You can see that as an example in H.P. Lovecraft's stories about Cthulhu and whatnot, or just even Cthulhu being present in universes where the world is still in the 20s. And you have these great beasts from space entering our universe and wreaking havoc, but we don't ever try to understand how those beasts work or truly exist. There's always this magic element behind them. I think a title that brings cosmic horrors and sci-fi really well together, though, is Stellaris. Now, this is a sci-fi strategy game set in space. It's kind of like Sims and StarCraft put together for the gameplay, I would say. But after playing enough turns in Stellaris, sometimes you'll have a cosmic horror with really strong stats appear in your game world. Now, there's a few ways to survive. You can have your military might be strong enough that you defeat it, and there are many veteran players who don't really see these cosmic horrors as a threat. On the other hand, you have much more simple-minded players like myself, and I have an issue with trying to survive against Leviathans and the like. My tactic? Run. This usually works for me because I can lead them around, or they ignore me and I don't really have to worry. Sometimes I'll have to sacrifice scouting parties Or what I really like to enjoy is I like to outmaneuver these space horrors into enemy territory, and there they just eat my enemies. But this introduction of space and cosmic horror, it's bringing together magic with space because we don't understand these beings. And I know that there's that saying, any advanced technology can be magic, because we wouldn't understand it. It would be seen as magic. Now, I'm sure if you showed an iPhone to people during the Renaissance period, they would believe it's magic, but it's just technology that they don't understand. And that could be the case. But for the people who are living in the Renaissance period, for them, it's magic. And that's how these cosmic horrors are being perceived as well in Stellaris. So I'd have to say that they do count as magic. And I think there's another universe that really covers the topic of magic and sci-fi to a much greater degree. And this would be the Warhammer 40k universe. There's so much lore here, and there's so many ways to enjoy that I think understanding the entirety of the Warhammer 40k universe is basically worthy of a master's degree. I mean, understanding all of that is probably more schoolwork and reading than a master's degree for many different majors would require. But, one thing I learned about recently for the Warhammer 40k universe is that their mode of transportation for humans to achieve faster than light speed is by entering the warp. Now, I'll read a description here I found online about the warp. The warp's existence is fueled by the emotions and souls of all sentient beings in the materium. Warp space is without form, and the laws of time and space do not apply there, for both size and time are simultaneously infinite and irrelevant within the warp. Which kind of sounds confusing. I've seen some descriptions as the warp being described as basically a hell space or a pocket dimension, or just an area of space that we don't understand, but humans use it without truly understanding what it is. And to humans, and to myself, I would view that as magic. Now, this is just like the tip of the iceberg for cosmic magic or cosmic horrors and those sorts of elements being brought into a sci-fi world and being integrated with technology. But I would like to say with 100% confidence that Warhammer 40k would fall under the space fantasy genre. There's demons from hell, which basically plague the universe, and you have other races like the Necrons, and to my understanding, they're unkillable hive machine-like beings with advanced technology. And there's also other advanced races and not as advanced races. Some create their own worlds, or you have the orcs who just will things into existence just by thinking them. It's a lot to cover for the Warhammer 40k universe. I think it's too much for this video and too much for my understanding right now. I'm not qualified or know enough to talk too much about it. But even with that simple understanding about the Warhammer 40k universe, I think it would be a space fantasy. Just to end off here a little bit, this kind of brings me into my next title, which I think a lot of people are familiar with, and that would be Doom. Even from Doom's beginnings on the on older computers in the 90s and whatnot, we had humans mining on Mars and its moons. And that's pretty sci-fi because as a race now, we haven't even gone to Mars with humans. In Doom, in the story, you have humans, you have corporations, you have military power on Mars and their moons. They're mining for different materials. They're trying to work on teleportation or transportation methods. That sounds super sci-fi to me. But everything kind of takes a twist when, the humans are mining on Mars's moons and they discover a portal to hell, which invites demons to this moon and destroying the facility. And this is where our titular hero, the Doomslayer, or Doom Guy for you fans, has to fight off this invasion and take the fight to hell. And so that's the original Doom stories. Now we have the new stories with Doom and Doom Eternal. And we discover that there's multiple planets and realms which play a much larger part in the story of Doom than the humans within this universe would know of, such as the existence of Agartha, or hell is eating Earth up slowly and we have to figure out why, and this is becoming news to humans. And then, of course, you have Earth. But it's kind of a unique twist of Abrahamic religious elements being brought into a setting of an advanced Earth. And we also see that there are more fantasy tropes being added for entertainment value. Now, one thing I'll say about introducing these Abrahamic religious elements into the story of Doom, does that make it magic? I would say yes. You have basically what you see as, the knights of hell, or you have demons from hell, and then you also have angel-like figures, and they're fighting this grand war for heaven and hell. But they don't explicitly call it heaven. Is this proof in the Doom universe that there's a god? It's never explained like that. It's more of these entities exist, these realms exist, and how is it affecting humans who are in the future? And that's what I would say is pretty good for, crossing off all the criteria for being a space fantasy title. Now, I know some people might get upset, and Doom has fallen under a little bit of scrutiny because of these Abrahamic religious elements. However, the whole world is a fictional universe, right? And because they choose to portray heaven or hell or demons as this way, it's all a work of fiction. So in their world, this could be magic, and not to be a dig at religion and whatnot. That's all for, how you guys enjoy these forms of media. For me, this is just basically a very simple coverage of space fantasy. I know there are so many more titles to enjoy within this genre. I've only covered stuff that I know about or I've been exposed to, but I'd really like to know, how you guys think about the space fantasy genre itself, or if you guys have any suggestions for media that I should check out. I mostly covered video game. I think I only covered video games, but I know that there's other titles like Dune could be considered a space fantasy, a space opera with that as well. But I'm always open for more suggestions. And if these sorts of videos entertain you or you'd like to help out, I'd greatly appreciate that. And it'd be great for you guys to let me know. As for right now, I think the next video that I'd like to cover would be focusing on Sid Mead and his sci-fi art, which influenced so many popular titles that a lot of the world has been exposed to. Sid Mead is basically responsible for being the sci-fi and cyberpunk artist. He's influenced the worlds of things like Cyberpunk 2077, even some elements within the tabletop cyberpunk game. I know that he's also been the inspiration for things like Akira or Ghost in the Shell, and by extension, things that are inspired by Ghost in the Shell, I'd say, are also, responsible to give their thanks or pay their homage to Sid Mead himself. I know Ghost in the Shell helped bring about a bunch of different cyberpunk and sci-fi themed animes, and it's really interesting to see how just simple sketches or drawings made by somebody could influence a lot of media that we see today.